Today we're doing a chapter review on ellipses, 3 axes of space and a bit on proportion. So I thought it was very apt today that we'd draw an isopropyl alcohol bottle. First of all though, before we draw anything, we've got to make sure we get the proportion right, otherwise it's going to look too squash. So just so for easier viewing, I'll just use a vernier caliper, but you can use your fingers. So in this case, I'm going to use my base as one standard unit, or one, so one reference. 1, 2, 3 and a half is approximately the height. So what I've written there is, again, if that's 1, 1, 2, 3 and a half is the ratio of my cylinder, and that circle that there represents the top view. So top view, front view, and that's my ratio. So I'm just going to replicate the same thing, but I'm going to scale it up again. So I'm going to choose this as being 1. So there's 1, 1, 2, put that a bit better. So there's 1, 1, 2, 3 and a half approximately. So just here. So that there is the area that my cylinder is going to have to fall in. So I've got the proportions correct. Another thing I want to check is the main body of this bottle versus the top. So in this case, the top there is 1/3. So this part here is 1/3 of the whole top, or the whole ratio. So that there, that's 1. So make this 1 here. So that's where all this mechanism part falls. So the next thing to do is draw my center axis line. And we're using, remember, 3 axes of space as my reference. So I'm just going to put a 3 axes of space here because that's where the neck of my bottle is going to be. And I start by forming the basic cylinder. So performing the task of creating the perspective box, or in this case perspective cylinder, that my object is contained within. So first ellipse, and another 3 axes here, so this is the bottom of the bottle. So I want to just double check 3 axes, yep, bottom of the bottle there. In fact, when you think about it, that's the bottom of the bottle there, so the 3 axes should be up here, so otherwise I've effectively made it longer. Just do that ellipse a bit better. It takes a bit of practice sometimes. 3 axis space, so bottom of the bottle, neck of the bottle, top of the bottle. But I'm still going to do the top of the bottle full size, and I'll show you why that is later. Just flatten that ellipse off. So this space here is where that shoulder of the bottle forms, so I'll get to that first. And also I've got this little cylinder here on top, so there's a cylinder on top of a cylinder. So I'm just going to check relative to that size. So in this case, if that's 1, that's about half the size of the bottle, that diameter. So if that's half, if half is that size, so that's approximately the size of the cylinder or the circle I'm going to make. So just replicating it here. There's one cylinder, and I'll do the same thing here. So I'm going to plot again where this mechanism or top part of the mechanism is going to fit. So there's one cylinder, there's the main cylinder. This part here, pretty ordinary, it doesn't really do much. What I might do later is add a bit of text. So I might add the text in here, but we'll get to that later. So the first part of the bottle has got a bit of a push button component. Now the other thing to remember with sketching is you don't have to do it exactly the same, it's just a rough representation. And it's also divided, again the bottle is divided approximately in half. That's that fatter part of the cylinder. Just so I remember what part I'm doing, I'm just going to put the little vertical lines on it. Also there's another component that's a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller than the cylinder I should say. that part there. And the part that I'm drawing is this part here. And then there's a smaller part which matches up to what I've got here for the actual sprayer. And I could spend a bit of time doing the nozzle, making this a little bit bigger for the cap of the part that you press on. But for all intensive purposes, I've now got the basic shape of my bottle, which I'll line in later. In the meantime, notice here that the top has a little bit of smoothness to it, so at the moment it's a little bit sharp. So what I can do is, using the outside edge here, just round that off, using my original lines as a guide, so just to give it a bit more shape. And because it's made out of plastic, I'm going to leave some of these lines in here, but I'm going to leave them as little circles. I'll just get to that too to make it look more plasticky. So I've still got the basic framework for what we're doing. As I said before, I'm going to add a bit of text to this. So ellipse and ellipse. Remembering, of course, that I've got to put the text or draw the text still in perspective. So I'm just going to give this a name of remember, the text is going to be right larger, but I've still got to make sure I'm doing this in perspective. So it's around the other side, so I'm following the pattern of what I'm doing there. Oops. Let's just call it covert for now. Not going to be able really to see. So same thing, the text is following the frame that I've set up for it. I'd argue that the text there is probably a little bit too big, so I'm going to give that another go and make it a little bit smaller so I can fit it in there properly. So it's partly sometimes to do it in pencil, just to get an idea of what you want. Checking that it does look like it's in perspective. Might even divide that a little bit, but just to bring it a little bit round. Even squash a little bit more. So now I get the fun part of lining everything in. So in this case, showing what you can and can't see. Use a straight edge just to sharpen some of these bits up. Doesn't have to be perfect. It adds to the dynamic of not adding everything in that you see. Don't have to put all the lines in to give the suggestion of plastic. And as I said before, you can make things look like plastic just by adding little shapes like that, just to show it's curved. A few little bubbles here. And already starts to look a little bit more see-through. That's our simple little study on how to draw cylinders in perspective using our proportion to work out how it's going to look. So it may not look exactly the same, but we all know now that there is a cylinder. Obviously here the shoulder probably needs to be flattened a little bit more, but you get the idea.